Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. My name is Andrew Claudio, a.k.a. GMAC, and it is time to preview another Knicks matchup, this time on Monday night at Madison Square Garden against the Toronto Raptors, a homecoming of sorts, although the availability of those potentially coming home to New York will be a topic of conversation. Emmanuel Quickley, as you know, has been out for the majority of this season with an injury, and RJ Barrett missed the last either game or two with an illness, so we'll see if RJ returns to MSG for the second time after a very solid season that he's been having so far. If you remember, the last time the Knicks played the Raptors, he was the best player on the floor in the game that the Knicks eked out in the closing moments. I call this a homecoming, but really RJ returned home to Canada when the trade happened a week ago today, a week and a year ago today, I should say. December 30th will be the 1-year anniversary of this trade, and one of the very best profiles of RJ Barrett and what's happened since that trade went down was written by my guest today. Joining me from Sportsnet up in Canada, Mr. Michael Grange. Michael, thank you so much for joining me. Happy holidays. Welcome to Knicks Film School.
Thanks for having me on, Andrew, and happy holidays to you as well.
Of course. I can't speak glowingly enough about this RJ profile, and I want to be upfront in saying that I think I fall in the middle of like the RJ diehard and the RJ skeptic. I was like a RJ as it's presented, I evaluator. Like that's really how I was. Like if he was going well, it's like, all right, what's going well? Is this sustainable? And then the opposite. If it's going poorly, what's going poorly? Is this like here to stay? And looking through what's happening to him through all the numbers and some of the film has been fascinating this season. And your article for Sportsnet, Meant to Be by Michael Grange, really profiles what has happened since RJ went to Toronto. Like I said, December 30th is a week from today, and December 30th a year ago was a pretty earth-shattering moment for Knicks fans and, of course, for RJ Barrett. The first question I have for you as far as this profile is concerned, you know, him going home, it was made a lot of, and him going back to Canada. Based on your conversations with RJ and with making and doing this full profile, do you think he has the success or even the attitude that he has now, especially with everything that happened off the court, which I don't want to get into too much, but we'll allude to it? If he gets traded to like Philly or Memphis, or because it was made so much that he could not have gone to a more perfect place, not even a situation, a perfect place than the Raptors. Do you think he's having this attitude or this mindset or the success now if he's traded anywhere else?
I guess it would be dependent. That's probably not the greatest answer, right? But I think I mean, there's two elements to what you're getting at there. And one is arriving with the Raptors in the situation they're in, the time in their trajectory or the place in their trajectory they're at. So that's one thing. And I think that has been perfect for RJ Barrett in the stage he is at his career. And you know, I think maybe a contrast to where the Knicks were at when he was there. And so that's one element. And then the other element is, of course, where the Raptors play, right? And that's at home. And so we'll kind of tackle those a little bit separately. I think anywhere RJ was going to arrive after playing with the Knicks, you know, I think for his career to flourish, take a next step, it needed to be in a place where he could sort of play with more freedom. And I think with the Raptors, he's had almost total freedom. And that's not to say, and you talk to RJ, you talk to his trainers, you talk to his family, you talk to people around him, like you'll never hear anything, you'll never hear any Knicks bashing, you'll never hear any Tibbs bashing, you'll never, like, it's not even just the high road, it's just a kind of an awareness of what the Knicks needed from him at that time and how he was able to contribute and all of that. But, you know, I think for his own sake to develop, he needed and has flourished in the opportunity where you know, he's not playing third or fourth fiddle to, as you know, as Quickly said, look, Julius Randle and you know, Jalen Brunson. Like, I mean, you know, you're going to defer to them. You have to. And it would be the same situation now with Cat and all the rest. So, so he comes to Toronto. He's got the ball in his hands. It's a high pace offense. It's a ton of transition. It's a ton of cutting. It's very egalitarian. There's not a lot of ISO basketball being played, and all of a sudden, RJ flourishes. He shines, and I think he would say, "Look, I'm not a different player necessarily. It's just I am being asked to do things that are more consistent with how I've always preferred to play." And he would say, he would cite his experiences with the national team, junior national team, just various stops along his way where the kind of basketball he's played offensively was a little bit different than what he was able to do with the Knicks, just because of what the Knicks needed from him in that space. And so that's one element. So he's been able to really grow. And Drew Hanlon, his trainer, he says they almost treated it like a second rookie season because, if you remember, his first rookie season with the Knicks was like old Knicks, right? Like coaches fired,
a mess,
mess, So that was kind of there wasn't much going on there. And then very quickly they became a very good team with a very structured approach and a very specific role for RJ. And so he didn't quite get to learn on the job the way a lot of rookies do on bad teams. So he's on a bad team, and he's learning on the job, and he's kind of risen to the occasion, I would say. And then the other element is the fact that all of this is happening in his hometown, and I think there's a true pride in him wearing a Raptors uniform, in taking the floor and being at Scotiabank Arena. And I've known RJ since he was like 13, and I have very vivid memories of his dad, Rowan Barrett, bringing him kind of backstage, at Scotiabank Arena and introducing him to LeBron James, and kind of introducing him to various NBA figures, and hanging out with his godfather, Steve Nash, and just kind of acclimatizing himself. So, and when RJ was introduced as a Raptor, he cited DeMar DeRozan, Kyle Lowry, and who wouldn't? But he also mentioned like Sonny Weems. And the last time Sonny Weems played for the Raptors, he started 28 games on a team that won 22 for the season. So he was diehard, right? And so there's all of that. There's just that pride of place. And then the final element to this is the family tragedy that the Barretts suffered through, almost beginning this time a year ago, just shortly after the trade. And just going through that, the death of his brother Nathan, kind of embraced by family, church, friends, and the larger Raptors community. I think that was also critical too.
So a couple follow-ups to that was very well said what you just went through, and I think when I had Esbar Heaney on right after the tragedy had happened, when the Knicks went up to Toronto in March last year, and it's funny, I had the same epiphany RJ apparently did, that while a lot of Knicks fans, and like we're separated, like we're not in it, but we're fans, right? Like we live and die with the team. We're like, man, all this success that they're having, this new version of the team, and then RJ goes through this tragedy and is home for it. And it was like, oh, like even RJ said, like, look at God, like this is awful what I've gone through, but to be thankful to be with my family, to be able to leave the arena to go to the hospital was part of the divine intervention, as your article puts it, the meant to be of it all. And just like you said, to get back to the fact that he grew up a Raptors fan, and it just meant more to figure out his career, figure out this next stage of his career in the uniform he grew up wanting to be in his whole life. It seemed like a match made in heaven. And the first follow-up I would have, I'm glad you said that there's no Tibbs bashing usually with RJ, because I think the quotes that came out of this
on the record and off the record,
right?
Says, I'm sure.
But as far as like the clips that came around through Knicks land, through what I saw, it's funny. Like you read the aggregated quote of him saying, I'm just gonna read it, but I cut more just because I know I have a chance to get the ball, and even when I don't get it, I'm not upset because I know I'm gonna get it on the next one. If you cut all the time and you never get the ball, you're probably not going to want to cut. And like there's a twofold reaction when you read that and then you don't actually read the whole entire article. And it's like, oh, so he's criticizing Tibbs and the offense that was run there, which was more isolation, less passing, preventing turnovers, but still, as RJ even put it, effective. But it's also kind of ironic that the Knicks offense now has so much cutting and so much movement and so much passing. And it just, like I said, it's personnel based, that he was doing what was asked of him at the time. I mean, so you kind of already answered it, but any Knicks fan that perceives that type of quote and the Drew Hanlen quote of apparently as soon as the trade happened, Drew Hanlen texts him, now you'll be able to show how good you really are. Like, this is more internally him being like, all right, here's a second chance. As you said, a second rookie year. Do you sense any ill will toward the Knicks and his time there, and potentially this could have been 4 years ago? Or is it just, oh, I'm glad this is happening now. I'm thankful for my time in New York. You know, how would a Knicks fan that perceived that way, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say it just pretty much as you did. And, he takes a lot of pride. He loved being a Knick. I think he loved that experience. And I remember talking to him on the eve of the playoffs the first time around and how excited he was, and subsequent, just the atmosphere in the Garden. Like, he gets it. Like, he's a basketball purist. He really understands that the Garden just isn't any other arena, and the Knicks aren't any other uniform. And he takes a lot of pride in that, he left that team better than he found it, right? Yeah. Like, and that's not him saying it was me, and Emmanuel Coakley would say the same thing. It's just an understanding that they bought in and dove in and helped the Knicks kind of get on the trajectory that they're on now. And and I think there's probably a little bit of pride in the sense of look, people talking about as championship contenders, and I kind of think they could be too. And I'm sure they would say, well, we could have done it with us, right? Like, I don't think it's like because we left it there here. So in terms of he's down with Julius Randle. He's down with Jalen Brunson. Like, there's not like this, they were holding me back. It's just an acceptance of, the NBA, there's only, 240 minutes and so many shots, and there's just going to be a hierarchy, and even in egalitarian offenses, there's hierarchies. I think it was just an appreciation beyond any of the other elements of it being traded, of now I get a chance to kind of explore new sides of my game in a different environment. And I think it's as simple as that. Like, there's again, I think anyone who's ever played for Tibbs, probably there's a grumble here or there, but I mean, like, it's
RJ's playing less minutes now. He's still playing like 33 a game, but he's playing
exactly.
He's not asked to play close to 40 each game.
Yeah, but I mean, overall, the vibe is it was a great experience. It made him better, and he's eager to kind of explore the envelope of his game in a different environment.
Aside from the national pride that he gets to take being in a Raptors uniform, again, another element of the story that stood out to me was RJ talking about what he watches on Netflix. Like, he watches The Last Dance, he watches that show Quarterback, and all of these shows that profile someone that should be like the one in charge and the one that is the focal point of your offense. And, this season he's averaging 23 and a half a game, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, which, to the Knicks fan that remembers the drives he would take that wouldn't lead to kickouts, to then see him in transition and becoming like a good shot, whether it be him at the rim or him finding someone on the wing in every transition possession. It's been cool to see him develop. It's interesting we're having this conversation, Michael, with what's going on with Julius Randle right now. And I'm not touching that. That is a conversation for the next time the Knicks play the Timberwolves. But I know there are Knicks fans either watching or listening to this whenever they get the chance to, that used to be big RJ Barrett fans and thought if they had given the keys to him instead of Julius, this could have been happening. Like you said, could have been that RJ discovers this and then becomes the focal and the hub here in New York. I guess this more goes to a Raptors question, and you allude to it, that there's a next element of, can he be part of the thing that turns them back to competitive winning basketball. And I guess that's really my question. And I guess him being a national hero to an extent, do they view him as like this improvement we're seeing is part of the long-term future? Basically, do you think he's part of the foundation that they're going to eventually build around toward contention one day?
That is probably a $200 million question.
Okay. Even with the conversion rate. Gotcha.
First of all, as you point out, right, RJ's productivity, you can't deny it. And what's really fascinating, you could put his numbers side by side with Julius Randle, and for a Knicks fan, it'd be, wow, okay, that's pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. Because if we're just talking pure numbers and efficiencies and all that, like he's up there on very short lists, with the Jokic's and the Doncic's and, mm-hmm. Those kind of guys who are just doing it across the board. Obviously not quite to that level, but, there's only a handful of guys hitting all those numbers at, say, 50% from the field. And RJ's one of them. So a Knicks fan might look to Julius Randle and make a comparison. A Raptors fan would look to, say, Pascal Siakam, who, was traded basically to kind of make way for RJ. And I would say, RJ's numbers on a raw basis are better. Pascal would, you'd say, well, he's maybe got a little bit more efficiency, whatever. But the point being, he's very, very productive. The issues are going to be, can that productivity extend, and in an environment where, when Scotty Barnes is back at full health, Emmanuel quickly back at full health, the lineup, it gets a little more robust, and, the aim is win, right? So can he do it as part of a winning environment? That's a test for anybody putting up numbers. It's we know in the NBA, you can put up numbers on bad teams. So you got to do it on good teams. And then the other question is, he's a year away. He'll be eligible for an extension this summer. And it's going to be a very interesting negotiation because the Raptors have clearly committed to Scotty Barnes. They maxed him. They almost maxed Emmanuel Quickley. He's on for $35 a year. And in this day and age, as we all know, you've got to be very careful what you do with that next contract and who you give it to. And, so I think, I think there's, just like Knicks fans, there are Raptors fans and basketball experts within the Raptors organization who go, the defense needs to get better. The turnovers need to come down. The consistency needs to be that much more. And, because I think when at the level of production RJ's generating, he could stand here and go, yeah, I should be, I'm a $50 million player. I'm a $40 million player. And then the counter to that would be $40-50 million players. They don't have some of the holes in your game that still need to be filled. And so I think that's going to be a really fascinating question going forward, because unlike teams that are rebuilding, the Raptors already made pretty heavy commitments to a couple of guys. And, the next commitment they make is going to be one that's people are really going to have to think long and hard about.
So you would know better than I would, being in the Raptors, around Raptors fans, basically. And what's the temperature check of Raptors fans and what they should do? Like, should they extend RJ? And again, the national hero element of it, that when you're watching Team Canada as a Raptors fan, you're also getting to watch RJ Barrett. Like, that's not lost on me, that there's an element of this that's bigger than just signed player that's gotten better since we've traded for him. There's also, like, it's RJ Barrett, like it'd be like if someone grew up in Manhattan and then got traded to the Knicks and his career got better, Yeah.
No, there's a lot to it. And I think, we're talking about it. It's not something that has to be determined this season. And as much as he is extension eligible next summer, they don't have to give him one. I think the real measure of this will be when, the Raptors, even as constituted now, if they can ever finally get healthy and get their primary guys on the floor together, how does that look? And how does RJ perform in that environment? And, and then, like, it's pretty clear. I think he's got to become a better defender. For as good as RJ can play occasionally defensively, as he and as productive as he can be, there are still too many possessions where, his head's not in the right place on that side of the floor, and he's not alone, right? Like, I mean, it's a pretty common, we've seen elite offensive players, struggle with that many, many times. And RJ's not all that much different than anyone else, and he's, and to his credit, it's something that's being emphasized to him. And as a guy who's 6 years in the league and he's had his fair share of success, like, he's not pushing back. He's really committing to try and make things work and become a better player. And I think, ultimately underlying all of this, RJ Barrett's a great kid, a real competitor, and he wants to be the best basketball player he can be.
Again, I'm really glad you clarified that it's very much him complimenting Toronto and the staff there, the quotes throughout your article, that like what he says about the assistant coach that he works with most of the time, and that he gets a lot of good criticism that sometimes it'll make him want to run through a wall when the Raptors head coach will and again, I can only look at it through the prism of, like, you just came from Tibbs, so it's tough. It's tough it can be tough if you only read the quotes, which is, I'm glad you clarified that it's very much I'm happy for my time in New York. I'm very ready to, like he said, have a second stint or a reset button get pressed here in Toronto. You did mention what this team can be when they're healthy, which is a good transition into what the Raptors have been. Now, Scotty Barnes missed some time. He's back. Although the last time he played the Knicks, he suffered an ankle injury. So they've been snake bitten a bit. This Immanuel Quickley thing, just from afar, has been perplexing, to say the least. I guess I'll just ask you, to the Knicks fan that doesn't know, who's playing tonight?
Quickley is not playing.
Okay.
RJ is game time. He was sick, missed the game, practiced, and then got sick again before the game last night and missed that. So apparently he is on the trip, and he's so game day to day. And then Jakob Poeltl, who's really integral to their. They're a much better team when he's playing. He's not playing. Davion Mitchell's not playing, and Bruce Brown, as far as I know, is not playing. So, but for a Knicks point of view, Immanuel Quickley, like, we're still waiting to see him play. You know what I mean? Like, he was good when he came over during the trade last year. He missed a ton of time with some personal issues last year, the death of his uncle. But literally, he's on a roll of bad luck. It's kind of hard to describe. Like, he sprained his thumb before training camp, missed all of training camp except for one exhibition game. Plays one exhibition game, looks great. Plays 14 minutes in the opener, gets undercut, falls on his back, and he misses, I think, 8 games with that. Comes back, and in the fourth quarter of his second game back, tears the ulnar ligament in his elbow. It's
UCL, right?
Yeah, it's like a pitching injury. Got caught up in a screen, and he's been out. That was, I think, November 10th. So, and he's probably at least another 2 weeks still. So that's, and you feel for Quick. We talked to him the other day, like, he's, kind of trying not to lose his mind, basically. But, but he is very essential to what the Raptors ultimately look like, because, Scotty Barnes is kind of, at his best, is like a power point guard in a way. Like, he is a really exceptional passer, playmaker at both ends of the floor. Just got amazing size and power. He's kind of like Giannis. He's sort of like a hybrid of Giannis and Draymond in a way. And he's, and he's best complemented. And one of the reasons the Raptors went out and made a point of, they gave up a pretty good player, Anunoby, and, by the way, Precious Achiuwa, for Immanuel Quickley. Like, he was the focus of that trade, really. And, just because they see Quickley as a perfect complement to a guy like Scotty, because he's, Quick's perfectly capable, they feel, of being a very good primary guard, lead guard when not needed, but is also very comfortable and effective sliding off the ball and just creating space with his gravity. And they're encouraging him. They want him to be a guy who shoots 10 threes a game. And that interplay between him and Scotty Barnes is, they've tied about $400 million up into it, put it that way. And, they're hoping for big things. They just haven't had a chance to see it yet this year.
So I guess we'll see if RJ plays tonight. And it is just ironic that any Knicks fan listening to this remembers the RJ's out sick, like with he had a migraine for a week once in New York. There was a December where even Tibbs was like, I was told he's sick. Like the unexplainable sicknesses that RJ can get sometimes we're very common with it. Now I'm not suggesting that this is like something that normally happens. It's just weird that it seems to always happen in December, but I digress. You mentioned OG Anunoby and Precious Achiuwa, and I just want to get your take before maybe I take some questions from the people watching live. I mean, what have you seen from OG Anunoby, your perspective from your vantage point, what he's been in New York, what he's been, I gotta be honest, it's both an OG and a Precious thing. Like, did you know the Knicks were getting a rotation piece, that the Raptors were trading like the Knicks future backup center with Achiuwa? What's your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, Precious is a guy, like the Raptors were quite high on him. They got him in the Kyle Lowry signing trade when he went to Miami, and he was kind of like the centerpiece of that. And he had moments in Toronto, like there were, he had some injury issues. He had moments where he looked like he could not play basketball, like just a guy who, the game just seemed to move too fast for him. And, there was never any physical issue with him. I mean, he's magnificent. But, he would just kind of get sped up and just do weird things. Right. But over time, he got more and more comfortable. And what's been interesting, I think, from a Raptors point of view, is that whole group that they had, sort of the post Kyle Lowry core. So I'm going Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Precious Achiuwa, what they included in that. They all kind of, one of the reasons that didn't stay together was they all wanted more. They all wanted a bigger role, like they kind of felt they had grown into something, they deserved more, and there wasn't really enough room to accommodate them all, either financially or even holistically on the floor, especially once Scotty Barnes got introduced to the mix. And so there's a little bit of irony from Raptors fans, is like with Precious Achiuwa, he wanted to be a face-up 3 or a face-up 4. He wanted to bang threes. He, athletically, like you watch that guy in a warm-up, and you're like, yeah, he looks like LeBron James. Like, why can't he do that? But in games, it just doesn't translate, obviously. And sure enough, goes to the Knicks. They kind of narrow his role to very specific, a switchable 5, kind of rim running guy, disruptor defensively. And he looks, guess what? He was good in Toronto doing that. Wasn't always comfortable with that role. In New York, he's pretty effective. If he's a backup 5 or one of your 3 bigs, he's got a lot to offer. As long as he kind of stays in that role at this stage of his career. And then OG Anunoby, he wanted more. He wanted to be a primary offensive option, and he never really showed that he was fully capable of that. And, his best role was kind of like 3rd or 4th option on a really good team, and just a devastating defensive presence. And, that's what he's doing in New York. And if you polled 100 Raptors fans and said, if he's on a really good team and that's his role, do you think he'd succeed? 100 of them would have said, yeah, as long as he stays healthy. He's always said he's had his share of injury problems too. But, I think the role he's playing, and if you contrast it maybe to where, like, in a way, he's doing what they needed RJ to do and had RJ doing, but he's perfectly fit for that, right? He's a very, very good outside shooter. He's a very good 1 through 5 defender, and he's a very good, as you guys all know, kind of situational offensive player, like off cuts, offensive rebounds, what it means, and attacking closeouts, he just overpowers, right? So he's, when he was on the trade market for like a year, right?
Yeah.
As the Raptors were trying to define their direction. And, you look at where he would fit, and he literally, and it's still true today, I honestly think he would start on every single team in the league. I think he would start on Boston. I think he would start on Oklahoma City. I think he would start on Cleveland. I mean, he's that good. He is, to me, the single best 3-and-D plus player in the NBA.
I think the high praise, and I don't think I disagree with that take either.
I mean, tell me who he's. Tell me, tell me who he's not better than in that role.
So it depends how you feel about Drew Holiday and whether
I love Drew Holiday, but he's 5 inches bigger and about 50 pounds heavier.
The length, I know they put Holiday on centers, but I would honestly, I saw OG shut down Joel Embiid in Game 4 of the Sixers series last year. So there's a
wait
length.
And see what he can do to Nikola Jokic. Like, I mean, he's so yeah. I mean, we can split hairs, and yeah, Drew Holiday. Like, I mean, in my mind, he's a Hall of Famer. So don't get me wrong.
Right.
There's no disrespect there. But I would say Drew's a point guard, right? Like, I mean, he can do multiple things, but he is really a point guard. So
yeah.
But if you're just looking for a guy to play 2, 3, or 4, be a floor spreading option who can attack the odd closeout and wreck your opponent out defensively. Again, there's not one team in the league that wouldn't start him.
Michael, you're on a New York podcast. You could disrespect anybody on the Boston Celtics you want at any time. It is okay with us here, I promise. We got some people watching live. Got a couple questions to get to before we get you out of here. From Swagness Narlson, outstanding name. RJ's killing it on my fantasy team. Should I sell high? No, keep him. He's gonna get a lot of opportunities the rest of the year. Let him keep cooking for you.
Yeah, the one thing I would say is as the Raptors get healthier, RJ's efficiency goes up. I mean, his numbers playing alongside Scotty, we haven't seen him alongside quickly, but so his raw output might come down a little bit for obvious reasons. But he's shown that he's even a more efficient player. So if your fantasy team values effective field goal percentage or something, maybe hang on.
There you go. From Dom Cappuccini, I'm rocking my NYK NBA Jam RJ and Brunson shirt tonight. Let's go Knicks. Shout out to Dom, who's got us another one with an actual question. How does the fan base feel building a playoff team around RJ, Scotty, and IQ Core? I love how RJ is having a career year in his hometown, but I hope he can find himself back in the playoff race again. Thanks. We somewhat answered this question. I guess a follow-up to Dom's question. I mean, this year, knowing the prizes that are at the top of the draft, but recognizing that like the play-in does exist and you could be a lottery team or even like a top 10 odds team and still make the play-in in the Eastern Conference. I mean, what do you think the goals are for the franchise? Is it like get as good of odds as possible? Or if you mess around and end up in a 9-10 matchup against the Pistons, is that like something they might try to go for?
The very first question I asked at the season opening press conference of the Saudi jury was, how would you label this season? And he said, it's rebuilding. And I subsequently asked him, so how do you value the draft, given it's, such an important, tool for talent acquisition? And he said, we value it a lot. So, I think they've been pretty lucky through 29 games or whatever it is, that their schedule has been incredibly difficult. Like they've only been favored in one game, and that combined with the injury luck they've had, they're 7-22, and everyone's going, yeah, like nobody's upset, nobody's kind of everyone gets it. But if you look at the last 20 games of their schedule post All-Star break, like they could go 15-5. Like they just seem to be playing a lottery team every single night. And, and I think if they get to that stage and they've already lost their, you're going to see some funky things happening, because the answer to this question is I think they really, really want to try to get the best lottery odds they can. And the reason for that is when you look at the way this team is constructed, if you can just inject one more high-end talent on a rookie deal, then you can sprint. Like you all of a sudden you're Houston. You add a couple of veterans and like this isn't a rebuild where they want to spend 3 years bouncing around the lottery. They want to snag one more really good player, and hopefully that they can be off to the races with that.
Staring at it now, they have the third worst record as it currently stands in the NBA, which would give them tied for the lottery odds being flattened at the top. So they're at 14%. The there, like you said, there's going to be some very fascinating things, not even just from the Raptors, but from the NBA with the talent that is supposed to be at the top. Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, Cooper Flagg,
It's going to be
obviously.
really, really hard not to be a 10th place team this year. It's going to take a lot of
Yeah.
focus.
Yeah. We call it the Portland pivot. Remember 2 years ago when Portland was like hovering around
Yeah.
like 10 games under 500, but maybe they could make a move if Dame came back. And then they just like lost 27 of 28 to end the season. It's like, oh, that's not a team that like you just put your G League team on the court. And we've named it the Portland pivot. When a team decides at some point we're just gonna start losing for the rest of the year, if that's okay. The last question I got is from Ben Kim Gervey. What is the blueprint for Toronto success at this point? What's it look like this year? How many seasons is the runway, and what are the key steps? The key part of this, because I know we've touched on some of this throughout our conversation, is the how many seasons. And if you could just enlighten Knicks fans that just don't know, like, did Masai or anybody give any insight into like how long of a rebuild this could potentially take, and how patient the fan base may be throughout that?
Yeah, I mean, great question, actually. I think the fan base is ready to be pretty patient. They had a tremendous run of success, going from 13-14 with DeRozan and Lowry, right through the championship year, their post-championship year. They had a great bounce back year after being in Tampa during the pandemic. And then, it was apparent they just needed to move on from that era, so to speak. And so this is almost like the first year of it. But because of the way they're positioned with like Scotty Barnes, who they are incredibly high on, like they truly see him as a top 15 player in the league. And then, as I said, with Quickly, they've made those commitments. And so they, once you start having your star guys burn through, years of their extension, like you're on the clock at that point. And so that's why this year to me is very, very critical. Like they really need to, it sounds terrible to say it, but it's just a function of life in the NBA is come All-Star break. When I said that schedule kind of eases up, they're going to need Jakob Poeltl there's going to be a lot of calf strains, I think, the last couple of months this season. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And because, so the runway, again, their scenario is, let's hope we get top 5 this year. They're very confident in their drafting ability. So as long as they're up there in that mix, they know they're going to find a player. Even top 10, I think in this draft, you're going to get a good one. But their fever dream is Cooper Flagg, just like everybody else. He would be a perfect fit. And then after that, I think they would be full gas. Like I think they would add veterans. I think they would try to be as competitive as possible next year, knowing that they have an extra pick with Indiana in 2026 from the Pascal Siakam draft. And knowing also that I think, guys like RJ, Quickly, Scotty, they're all in the very start of their prime. Like they don't want to waste that. And, so I think this year is very much a gap year, so to speak. They're playing a ton of rookies. That's helped them lose games, but it's helped those rookies develop. And they've had the injuries. It's kind of made it not so ugly. So if we're talking this time next year and they're 7-22, like people are going to get fired. It's going to be a big, big problem.
Well, I'll say this as a Knicks fan. I do speak for a lot of Knicks fans. I know this. The post-trade version of both teams last year, it was very interesting because Knicks fans, like they were 14-2 in December before Julius Randle tore his dislocated shoulder and Anunoby went down with a weird elbow injury. But we had this Knicks team that was really fun and seemed to have made a trade to get better and put them to a different level. And we had, for those of us with League Pass, we had like this buddy cop spinoff in Toronto that we were tuning in for. And the Raptors became our favorite League Pass team because of the connection that RJ and IQ have to this fan base and will have forever. So that's why, just on a personal note, like getting to read really the first insightful thing about RJ Barrett was very cool to read. If Knicks fans, if you're listening, you haven't read it yet, please, it's linked in this description of this episode. It's called Meant to Be. It's very extensive and has a lot of quotes from RJ himself. So I'm hoping we get to see him tonight and IQ at some point so I can watch my favorite spinoff show. which is RJ and IQ playing basketball together. Well, thank you, Michael, so much for joining me for this edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. Before you get out of here, anything else you'd like to plug?
Not at all, man. Just grinding away, and just happy to have a chance to cover the NBA. And I really appreciate this conversation, and hope everyone listening has a good holiday season, and their favorite team stays healthy.
Yes, their favorite team stays healthy and wins or loses as many games as either side wants them to. Mikey, thank you so much for joining me. And thank you to everybody for tuning in to another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. If you dug it, please head over to iTunes, drop a 5-star rating and a review. If you're watching, please like this video. Remember to subscribe. It really helps. I will actually be back tomorrow at noon to preview the Knicks matchup on Christmas Day against Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs. My first question is if Matthew Tynan, who covers the Spurs, can actually give me proof that Wemby's from this planet. But we'll figure that out by the time we get to that conversation. So tune in tomorrow at noon, Tuesday at noon, I should say, here on the YouTube channel. But until then, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the game tonight, and I will speak with you soon. Peace.